Okay, so today you have a couple of things you need to get complete. By the end of today, you need to have a summary on the bottom of pages 32 and 34. If you do not have a summary at the bottom of page 32 and 34, click pause now and go write those summaries. They need to be 3 sentences long or they do not count. You also need to have your preamble done for Tuesday. So go ahead and take that out of the front cover of your journal and make sure that your answers are bubbled in on the little Scantron sheet on the front. And finally, by the end of today, you need to make sure that you have your notes on page 34 and 36. Now, you should have done page 34 last night, but if you did not, go ahead and get that done now before you do your notes for today. When I come back tomorrow, I need to see all of your pages of notes, 32, 34, 36, complete. Your title for the top of the notes for today is the Boston Massacre, and this is at the top of page 36. I can tell you this, do not write big on today's notes because we are going to fill the entire page. I'll show you. So we fill the whole page all the way to the bottom, so make sure you write small, don't skip lines. And here is your essential question. What happened at the Boston Massacre, and how did it increase problems between England and the colonies? Now, you already know that problems are getting bad between England and the colonies because the taxes that have been passed are causing a lot of financial problems for the colonies, right? They've been boycotting, they've been attacking and killing some of the tax collectors. Things are not they're not going very well in the colonies, especially in Boston. And so today you're going to figure out what happens at the Boston Massacre and how it increases problems between England and the colonies. So the first thing you need to know is that Boston, which is the capital of Massachusetts, is the center of patriot activity. It's one of the oldest cities in America, right? It was originally founded by Puritans, but now it is a huge growing city. And it is the center where most patriots live. Now, there are patriots in all parts of the 13 colonies at this point, but if you had to figure out where the most of them lived, that would be in Boston. And this is the reason that patriotism, or the idea of the Patriots or Minutemen, are still a huge part of New England culture. So, for example, what's the football team that's in New England? The New England Patriots. So I want to show you a quick clip that I saw last week. And it just shows how much the Patriots are still a huge part of the culture. So this is LeGarrette Blount is about to score a touchdown for the New England Patriots, and you'll see who is waiting in the end zone for him when he scores. Go ahead and watch.
Advantage of the opportunity, and that is exactly what he's doing.
Here's Blount. Blount breaking it inside the 20, and all the way home for the touchdown.
Right over to some Patriots.
It stops to pose for a picture.
So, of course, the New England Patriots used to be the Boston Patriots. And again, it's just the center of patriot activity is in Boston. This is where most of the people who hate England live. And there's a reason for that. The people who are living in Boston or in the surrounding areas in Massachusetts, in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, they were raised by Puritans. They had Puritan grandfathers. So, before I tell you, though, I want you to tell me, why do you think Boston would hate England? Because of their relatives being old Puritans. What about that would make them hate England? I want you to think about how the Puritans thought of the king when they left England. Go ahead and write your answer for discussion question number 1. Okay, so you may or may not have put this down, but one of the reasons that Puritan grandfathers would have influenced the people of Boston is that when they were little, they may have had people in their family who had lived in England who said, "Oh, the king, he's the worst," or it's the worst kind of way to live. Coming to America was the best decision we ever made for this family, and so they've heard about how awful this king and this monarchy are back in England, and instead they've been told that America getting away from the king was the best way to have a good life. And so they already have been kind of brought up to hate the king. The second reason Boston is kind of the major place for patriot activity is that they have a lot of shipping. So what English laws would have made life tougher for people in Boston, especially regarding shipping? meaning they're bringing all of the cargo in from England, why would some of the laws we've talked about have affected them? I'll give you a hint. The laws that I'm thinking of are on page 34. Okay, so any of the taxes that were passed would have affected Boston, right? When people stop buying the goods, it affects Boston because then they've got all this cargo that's still there that hasn't sold yet. And so when England makes bad decisions in terms of taxes or other laws, a lot of them end up hurting Boston. And finally, the main reason that Boston becomes the center of patriot activity is it's the home of the Sons of Liberty. Sam Adams, Paul Revere, and John Hancock, all of them have lived in Boston their entire lives. And so when they start rallying people towards independence and towards getting away from England, it's no wonder that it spreads like wildfire. These are people who were pretty popular in the city, and so people listen to them when they say, hey, we're not okay with this. This is not the best way to have a government. People are going to listen. Okay, so let me set the scene for you. There's about 1,000 English soldiers that are living in Boston in 1770, and colonists hated them, right? Colonists didn't really associate, those soldiers as being defenders of the colonists themselves. They felt like they were being occupied, like they were being watched. And so the colonists would yell awful things at them. They would treat them really horribly. And it wasn't really a good place to be if you were a British redcoat. Sometimes they were also called lobsterbacks because their coats were red. It didn't help that the soldiers who were living in Boston, these 1,000 soldiers who were living there, it doesn't help that they've taken on second jobs, and their second jobs are unloading ships. Now, those are jobs that typically belong to Bostonians, and so that obviously isn't going to make Bostonians happy because they're going to get fired to allow soldiers to take these jobs. And just to go back really quickly, I mean, when you think about soldiers living in a city, it sends a pretty clear message. It doesn't send a message, hey, we're all one country. It doesn't send a message of trust. You only send soldiers to a place where you think there's going to be a war, right? And so it doesn't send the right message to the colonists when the king starts sending over soldiers into Boston and into other parts of the colonies. Anyways, so like I had told you, the soldiers start taking jobs from Bostonians. Why do you think a ship owner would hire a soldier rather than a colonist? And I'll give you a hint. It's not because he's a better or harder worker. It's not because he's stronger. There's another reason that a ship owner would want to hire a soldier over a colonist. Go ahead and write your answer. Okay, so soldiers would have been an attractive candidate when it comes to hiring someone because the soldiers are the ones who are checking the cargo on the way off the ships every day. And so if a ship owner can kind of get a good relationship with one of the soldiers, he can probably start to smuggle in some goods. He can probably not pay all of the taxes that he's supposed to pay. So they're trying to get themselves kind of a good relationship with some of the people who are supposed to enforce laws, hoping that they won't really enforce them. Okay, so on March 5th, 1770, and this is the date of the Boston Massacre, a couple of unemployed dock workers start insulting a soldier who is alone, and he's standing in front of the customs house. The customs house is in this picture right here. Oh my gosh, who are these pretty girls? So Miss McSwain and I took a trip to Boston 2 years ago, and when we were there, all we would do was stand in front of historical things and take pictures for you guys. And so the customs house is here, which is where a lot of the cargo would have been brought from the ports, and actually just down the street from there is where one of the ports is in Boston. So this soldier is standing in front of the customs house and he's alone, and these unemployed dock workers are angry. They feel like they've been fired because of him, even though it's obviously not just this guy's fault. They probably had a little too much to drink, and so they start getting pretty angry. So a couple more soldiers show up, and they're led by Captain Preston. And he's trying to control the crowd, and now it's growing at an alarming rate. More and more people are coming out. People have, clubs, and they have snowballs. Yes, snowballs, that's what they throw in Boston because it's so cold there. They have bricks, and they're angry. Now, Preston is telling his men, hold fire. Do not get into this with them. Like, let the crowd's going to leave. They're going to go home. And one of the main reasons so many people were there is someone had gone out and rung the bell that signaled to the community, hey, something's on fire, everybody come out and help. Now, of course, there wasn't really a fire. Someone did that to get everybody out into the streets, to start causing more and more people to show up. And once there's a real big mob, people start to do things they probably wouldn't do in a smaller group. One of those things is they start throwing those bricks, throwing those snowballs, throwing stones, and one of them hits a soldier in the head, as you can see by this beautiful picture that I've included for you. Now, if you're a soldier standing there, I think there were 7 or 8 of them, standing there with their guns, and there's, hundreds of people screaming and yelling and throwing things and threatening you. Would you have been nervous if you were a soldier? I want you to tell me why or why not. So the soldiers raise their guns more as a show of force, right? They're just trying to show off like, hey man, like back off. And they're hoping that if they just kind of threaten the colonists, they will go home. And Preston repeats his order not to fire. Do not fire. And then at some point, someone in the crowd, we do not know who, we do not know if it was a colonist or a redcoat, even though we're pretty sure it was probably a colonist, someone in the crowd yells fire. And when the soldiers hear fire, what do? They shoot. And so British troops fired into the crowd, and they killed 5 people. Crispus Attucks, you can see in this picture, is the first martyr of the American Revolution. He's the first one to die at the hands of the British. Now, Crispus Attucks, as I just said, he's an African American. He was an escaped slave at this time. And he's remembered as being the first martyr for the American Revolution, the first patriot to die. Now, someone who dies for their cause or their country, someone who dies for what they believe in, that's what we call a martyr. Martyr would be a vocab word you might want to highlight. And again, his name is Crispus Attucks, not Christmas, Crispus. And because of this event, Paul Revere makes a painting. And he makes copies of this and sends it all over the colonies. And it's called The Bloody Massacre. When they wrote articles about it, they called it the Boston Massacre. And in this image that I've shown you before, when we learned about bias, I told you that, there's not a lot of accuracy to this picture, right? As I said before, the colonists were throwing clubs, they were throwing bricks and rocks, snowballs, but you don't see any of that in the picture. You just see the soldiers firing into an unarmed crowd. And like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So although this picture isn't accurate, when it goes all over the colonies, people are horrified by what they see. They see colonists doing nothing wrong, and they see the British acting like tyrants or evil rulers, right? So here's the reality. 5 people died, and granted, nobody should have died, but 5 people died. Was this really a massacre? Pause now and put your answer. Okay, so most people would say, no, this wasn't a massacre. A massacre involves hundreds of people dying. 5 people, yeah, it's sad, but it's not enough to call it a massacre. But that's how it gets labeled. So this whole thing goes to trial. All of the soldiers are put on trial for murder. John Adams, who is Sam Adams' cousin, steps up to defend the soldiers. He knows they probably won't find any other lawyer in Boston who's willing to actually try to help them. And so he steps up and he does a very good job defending them. They end up being found not guilty. So they're set free, and the people of Boston are furious. They feel like this was not justice, that those men had killed regular Bostonians. They should never have been allowed to walk free again. But John Adams, in his commitment to justice, does defend them and says, hey, they were in kind of a rough situation. It was very scary. I don't blame them. We will learn more about the trial tomorrow, but for now, you are all done.